Welcome, dear listeners, to Satanist Nextdoor. We're your hosts, Lilin and Levine.
And Tommy and Lilin.
Whether you're an open-minded, curious onlooker or a fellow Satanist seeking camaraderie, our goal is to share our personal experiences and delve into the intricate tapestry of Satanism in our daily lives, occasionally inviting other guests to share their unique perspectives, leaving no pentagram unturned. We'll explore how our beliefs shape our views on society, dive into struggles and triumphs we've encountered, and reveal the humanity that unites us all. So grab your favorite chalice and join us on this captivating journey. Satanist Nextdoor is ready to peel back the curtain and offer you a glimpse into our world, one captivating episode at a time.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Satanist Nextdoor. Today, as we talked about in the past, we have some guests with us. Some really good friends who are also part of our congregation, Lilibat and Nigel.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, welcome, guys.
And we thought it would be a good episode to, just kind of talk about their path into TST. Because it was everybody's path is a little bit different. And I thought theirs was kind of unique. And so, let's get started. So, all right. Well, why don't you open it up? I mean, we've become pretty good friends over the last few years, or over the last year or so, I guess, maybe a few years, because it was COVID time or not. Yeah. I don't know. Time is like sort of warped into itself.
I definitely say over the last year, we've definitely got to know each other pretty well. And
yeah, definitely. And, your path was a little bit different. So maybe we can start out by saying, how did you find TST?
So, so probably like a lot of people, I started kind of looking into TST, and I can't exactly remember why, but it was during all the lockdowns and stuff, and probably late 2020, early 2021. And I think I just, for whatever reason, started looking it up and read the tenets and sort of resonated with the tenets like a lot of people. Been atheist for 20 years, something like that, and never really found a good community around that. And so we joined I guess at that point it was the international organization in April of 21 and got membership.
I actually didn't know you were looking into it initially.
Yeah.
I didn't hear about it from you until Sober Faction came up.
Yeah.
And then that was my
and that was a little bit after
to TST from you.
Yeah, and that was a little bit after looking into the main organization. So in like February of 22, I joined the Sober Faction group, like the Facebook group, and we got started with that, and then started attending some meetings. I think our first one was after a Temple Tuesday service, and that kind of got us more interested in, and actually, so I guess to back up a little bit, we got sober in September of 2021, and that was what then led us to look into Sober Faction once I somehow discovered that. And I don't know if it was just from the campaign page on the website or what, but once we got going in that, then part of the strategy for us to stay sober was to try and find some community and start getting involved in some stuff that was like outside of our normal sort of daily routine, because after the lockdowns and stuff, we were still a little bit isolated where we were living. So we thought, well, this would be an interesting way to sort of meet people, and found out that Houston has a local congregation and started talking to you guys. So.
Which was awesome. But a lot of people may not know, I mean, Sober Faction is one of my favorite campaigns. It does a lot of really amazing things. But can you tell us a little bit about what Sober Faction is, what they do, kind of like what your experience has been?
Yeah, so I guess I need to start out with a disclosure that I am modding for Sober Faction right now, which is basically that I moderate the chats in the meetings. And that I can't speak for Sober Faction in any sort of official capacity. So this is basically just my personal experiences.
These are personal
completely
experiences.
Understand.
Yeah. So Sober Faction has been going for a few years now. primarily it's an online platform. I think the private Facebook group. He objects.
Dogs in the background.
So primarily it's the private Facebook group is the main point of contact for everybody, and that's kind of where all of the meetings and things are scheduled. The meetings themselves are Zoom meetings. They like I said, they've got pretty much one every day. Some days, I think like Sundays, they've got two, and they're always doing things like pop-ups and whatnot in addition to the regularly scheduled meetings. And so their general idea is that they are a peer support group that's an alternative to sort of the supernaturalist groups like Alcohol Anonymous or AANA, and they allow people who want to get sober but don't want all of the superstition and things like that are involved with those groups, so they can just focus on their sobriety.
So they're, and you don't have to be a Satanist to be part of Sober Faction, my understanding.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
So
there's a lot very diverse community. I don't know if I've ever seen any like Christians necessarily in it, but I don't think that. I think as long as they weren't proselytizing, I think nobody would have a problem with it.
Cool.
Nice.
They are very welcoming.
Really nice. I know as a child growing up, my mom and some of her partners had alcoholism issues, and so I went to Al-Anon and NA, and then as a, my own personal journey, I've been involved in things like AA on and off. It was interesting to me to see this come up. I know there are other organizations out there that sort of do a similar devoid of spiritualism sort of thing, but this was cool because they kind of really focus on the personal empowerment and encourage people to build healthy relationships and really seek out their own role journey on this, but to support one another on that individually. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. They are very much against the idea that you have to submit yourself to a higher power. And this is part of the satanic sort of principles coming into it. Yep. Where you're responsible for your own recovery, and you basically are your higher power. And the group is there, or Sober Faction as an entity is there to help facilitate you finding support with that.
Nice.
Right. So either through, like for me, the Facebook group was sort of like a daily reminder where I could check it. People post, if they have something going on, they can get feedback from people. But it's just sort of a way that, like, every day I can look through the feed from the Facebook group and sort of be reminded about why I'm still staying sober, and like it's just kind of like a little kick in the ass every day.
It feels more positive to me. My experience with AA and Al-Anon was a bit negative in that, they flat out said, you will fail if you don't have a higher power to get you through this. So it's like, oh, well, great.
Yeah.
It didn't, I'm sure they also advocate for, helping each other through it, but otherwise you're going to fail without this higher power. So Sober Faction to me feels more positive in that people are there for you if you need it, but they're also there to cheer you on as like, you can do this, you've got this, it's not, you better get that, whatever deity to help you or you're screwed. So I don't know, it seems less fear-based.
Yeah, I would say that.
Less guilt-based, it sounds like.
Less guilt and shaming, because I know my experience with AA and NA also was, it's almost like if you relapse, you're shamed.
Yeah.
You've put in, let's say you put in 10 years, and you've got your 10-year chip, you go out, you have a drink. Shit happens, and then you come back and they're like, oh, you got to start all over again from day one,
Right.
Get your 24-hour chip. And it's like, it's almost like you throw away those 10 years and you're kind of shamed into supposedly being sober again. And to me, that didn't work with my personality. I was like, well, fuck it. If I lost that time, then what's the point?
Yeah. And I've actually heard too from people that like the higher power thing sort of worked in reverse, where they felt like they like it wasn't their responsibility if they relapsed because like, oh, they have no power over it, so they just go and do it, and that sort of like gives them an out,
Right.
or whatever too. But yeah, no, they do have like chips. They do the time thing, but they're not.
There's no starting over, right?
There's no.
They just say
You can if you want. That's the
it's
thing.
up to you. You
Yeah,
get to
it's like
choose.
your
whether
sobriety
it's-
is your sobriety, and
Yeah.
so if you have a slip up or you have a full blown like you go out on a bender, sort of relapse. It's kind of up to you if you want to start that clock over. Some people don't even do a clock. I mean, it's really across the board. But it's up to you, and nobody's going to shame you into starting that clock over. Like I've heard sort of analogies of like working out at a gym. That if you go to the gym for 6 months and then one day you don't go to the gym, like you don't say, the next day if you go back, you don't say you've been going to the gym for 1 day. Like you've been going for 6 months and you took a break. So you don't lose all of that sort of growth that you were doing as a person during your sober time by having a relapse. And I think the general idea now is that like relapse is sort of part of the recovery process.
Yeah.
Most people do it at some point or another, and it's like you pick yourself up and you learn from it and you keep going.
Yeah.
So.
Well, there was a conversation we were having at one point, and you had said one of the things you learned, and this might have not been from sober-faction, but it was in your sobriety journey, was that only an addict can understand an addict.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's true. Most people in recovery will relapse at some point, in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
It's whether you're quitting smoking, whether you're quitting whatever it is that you're addicted to, and you're quitting it. It's normally not first try out of the gate, cold turkey, and that's it.
Right.
I if anybody has, congratulations. I mean, hell yeah. If I can pat yourself on the back, but it is a journey. And it just seems like sober-faction seems to understand that.
Yeah, I would agree with
better
that.
than the experiences I had when I was younger and I went to things like AA or NA, as part of my partying and journey and all of that sort of thing in my life.
Right.
And not to detract from some of the organized religious beliefs that go into other programs, because great if it works for you, no problem there. But I think one of the differences being based in Satanism and the fact that part of the tenets with TST specifically is that people are fallible instead of, we're just human, fuck it, like we have human moments. No, we know that. We understand we make mistakes, and it's not about blaming a higher power or expecting a higher power to fill that gap. It's about learning how to find a way to fill that gap for ourselves. And I know Sober Faction utilizes skills like dialectic behavioral therapy, which I actually came to know about through working with depression and different. I have a traumatic brain injury I suffered with, and so I had learned those skills because I would deal with a lot of emotional issues. Mm-hmm. And then part of that was coping with extreme anxiety as well, and the dialectic behavioral therapy was good, but then drinking was my other coping mechanism. And anytime I had to deal with the public, that was something that I would often go to. And when I got involved with TST, it involved dealing with the public. And so that was something I would fall back on at first, because it seemed to make everything normal and calm, even though realistically it doesn't make anything normal except for your personal perception of it, right?
Right.
Is it seems like you're doing better, even if maybe you're actually not. So one of the things I loved about you guys joining our congregation, and I can't say that this is the way it is for everybody, but I feel like you brought this nice sense of stability to, like, it's okay not to drink. It's okay to have fun as people and just be people. And I don't think, because, just disclaimer, TST has been growing a lot. And I think before you guys joined, it was a lot more friend group-like. Mm-hmm. And so, partying, hanging out, things like that. And then as you started to say, well, wait, this is a religion, we're offering an opportunity for people to join as a community, and communities based on religion are supposed to help build and be healthy environments. And so it's like, well, we can't just hang out and get together at places and get drinks. And I mean, that's great, but that shouldn't be a focus. And I loved having you guys come in and bring some of that, the things you've learned, and share that with us. And it's been helpful to me personally, so I appreciate that.
So we shouldn't do every congregation meeting at a bar?
No. No, but like you said, Satanism is not a requirement. So Sober Faction has been great, but why move into Satanism? What was it about that was appealing to you guys?
I mean, I think, again, like part of us, or one of the things that we were really looking for was community. And it was, it was just hard to find any sort of community in the area. Really, like I just didn't know where to look, you know, and I don't exactly know how I stumbled on TST or whatnot when I did.
It's the thing to do when there's a pandemic. Right?
Yeah, you just start researching stuff. But yeah, that was what caused us to sort of reach out to the local congregation, was looking for that community. And, you know, we were sort of guarded at first because we didn't know if it was just going to be sort of a glorified drinking club, you know, because it very well could have been.
Well, I had a lot of probably the same thoughts that your typical folks do about Satanism. I didn't know anything about it before you started looking into it and were wanting to join, and I was like, oh, Satanists, eh?
Yeah.
So I really didn't know anything about it, and so I was a little unsure. But yeah, once you start looking into it, reading the tenets, it's like, oh, well, you know, seems pretty reasonable. And then once we started meeting people, you know, we started coming to the monthly Zoom meetings and talking to folks, and I was like, these are cool people. And that was what got me interested to begin with, was just, oh, these are the weirdos I've been looking for that I haven't ever found anywhere else.
Yeah, a lot of people say, you know, they don't become Satanists. They just discover that they've always kind of been a Satanist once they run into either some material, or they talk to somebody, or they meet another Satanist and they explain what Satanism is. We're not like the boogeymen and stuff like that. And it's like, oh shit. It's like when I met Lilin, I was already a Satanist. She wasn't. And it's like, ooh, Satanists, those are bad people. Those are, you know. And it was like, no, here, and, you know. And then she was like, oh shit. Okay. Yeah, this all makes fucking sense.
I mean, granted, back then, not to date myself too much, there was really no options like TST. And so there were definitely stigmas attached that did have merit. There were aspects of COS Satanism, which is where I came in, that I did not agree with, which doesn't mean everyone that's in COS does, just because they're there. But there's things that I personally couldn't align with. And then when I learned what the real roots of the development of the Satanic Bible were, and then a lot of the personal issues I had with some of LaVey's stances, because eventually it really became a religion of LaVey's philosophy. I just didn't feel like I fit in. And so when I kind of stumbled into TST, it fit with so many of the things that I felt were missing. Not that we're political, but there are political aspects where we're actually out there trying to combat some of the ever-encroaching theocratic stuff that we see all the time. But is it, like people will say, is it a cover for other devious things happening? I mean, what, in the few years you've been very involved, has it been any of the things that you were afraid it would be, or was it completely different from what you expected?
I mean, we can only speak to our congregation, but in our congregation, it's pretty chill. Nothing weird.
Yeah.
We like to play board games and watch weird movies, and, you know.
Yeah, and, you know, and I'll say, too, kind of from what you were saying, like, if TST didn't exist, we probably wouldn't have aligned with Satanism. Definitely not Church of Satan. I remember reading parts of the Satanic Bible when I was in high school, and I was just kind of like, oh, you know, it didn't really. I was a different person back then as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really don't think, and especially like if it was like a theistic thing, where there, you know, people are actually believing in the devil and like worshiping Satan, like, that would have been a no. You know? So I think it's really just the sort of TST style of Satanism that really spoke to us. And I think if, like I said, if it didn't exist, we probably wouldn't have looked any further into it.
Fair enough.
So like I said, we were kind of guarded, you know, approaching the local congregation, just to see what it was like. And I think the sort of normalness of it is really kind of what was attractive, you know, that it's a bunch of, you know, people that are sort of misfits, but like, we've always felt like misfits as well. And so it was really fun to be able to meet these people, because we're like, where else would we ever have met some of the people? Like we wouldn't have known where to go. And like we're all scattered across this large city, you know, it's different people in different suburbs. Like it's a really large area. We all are in different, you know, there's lots of different age groups. There's lots of different, like, just people in general. And so I feel like a lot of these people, like, we probably would never have even run into, you know?
True. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, everyone I've had the privilege of interacting with have been really interesting, unique people. I don't think any one person has been like another.
Yeah.
I mean, there's similarities that we all share, but I love the difference in age, like you mentioned, the difference in mentality, the difference in philosophy. We all kind of get to grow with one another through these experiences and conversations, like our book clubs. So that's been really fun. And then I know you guys are also parents. Does that bring something different to it for you? Was that a challenge that you guys had to work through when you were thinking about it?
I think so. I mean, I think that sort of where we live, like we don't disclose that we're Satanists really to anybody outside, you know, and part of that is to sort of protect ourselves and our kids.
Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine a lot of parents would never let their kids talk to our kids if they,
like,
you know,
there's just a lot of sort of unfounded stigma around it. And so, I think that was part of it. And I mean, also the idea that like I said, when we were getting sober, we wanted to find a community of people that we could start becoming involved in as a way to help us with our sobriety, in addition to just wanting to find cool people.
Right.
But it was like, we need to get active and like have things to do, you know,
other than go to the bar,
go to the bar or stay home and drink, you know, like it was like, we need to have sort of be accountable for things, responsibilities, you know, things like that, outside of our just normal like work day week and all that. And so that was a really kind of big part of it. And so we didn't really know if there would be other people with kids in the congregation, you know, so that was really cool to find out that there are, and that there's like sort of a whole, you get a whole lot of different perspectives just on parenting in general.
Yep.
Well, it was the first time I ever met a group of people where everyone was like, we didn't do the Santa thing. I was like, wow, I'm not the only one. Because I've spent so many years. Finally, my kids they're in their teens, and I don't have to worry about the Santa thing anymore. But that was so frustrating to me to have so many parents being like, your kid better not tell Mike he said there's no Santa. Or people get so mad about it. And I was like, oh, wow, everybody that I've met in our congregation didn't do the Santa thing.
Yeah.
Again, it's just we're not drawn to the superstitious kind of. I mean, I don't know.
I know when our kids were very little, we actually did do like the Santa magic thing, but it was like this limited. They knew it was kind of a fairy tale thing, and we'd put out food for the reindeer, but it was really for the wild animals. So we'd put like carrots and things that would disappear, and so the kids would know where it was going. But it was the ritual of doing the little night before Christmas poem, and getting to see the cookies out and having cocoa together and baking. So we would do that, but they knew it was part of a ritualized story. So we never were like, oh, this magic fat dude is gonna show up and touch his nose and pop into your room. So
well, I just let my kids think whatever they wanted, because they would sometimes come home and ask me, like, is Santa real? And I'd be like, what do you think?
There you go.
And if they said yes, I'd be like, okay. And that's kind of where I would leave it. But I was never writing Santa on gifts or anything like that.
Yeah, it was like with everything else. Like we didn't care if other people wanted to do that. It only became an issue when they would start asking us to like
lie to their kids. And,
keep their thing up, and it's like, okay, now that's
weird.
That's too much. Now it's weird.
Now it's becoming uncomfortable because you're asking me to actually lie to your child,
right?
And we've always treated our children, almost like adults with obviously, age appropriate discussions, but we didn't treat them like we'd watch other parents with their children, and it was like, why are you, explaining it? Like, why don't you just explain the truth of whatever the situation was, and just bring the truth down to their level, versus making up some lie or something like that. It's just kind of always baffled me.
That's the other cool thing I think about, like, sober faction people, even if they're not satanic, they have a satanic philosophy to a degree, right? Where they tend to be very honest about situations, willing to work through things, able to use their own cognitive skills and reasoning to sort of get to where they need to be. Has that been what your experience has been together? Did you guys take turns getting into this? I mean, how has this evolved for you from sobriety to Satanism, and how has that been?
I guess I would say you have definitely done more with Sober Faction. In the very beginning, when we first got into it, I really liked it. I felt weird in Al-Anon. I initially was going to Al-Anon because you had... I thought you were the alcoholic, and I just drank like a normal person, which was, I learned later on I was also an alcoholic. We were just at different places on the journey. You were a little ahead than I was, but I always felt a little weird in Al-Anon. And then when I attended a couple Sober Faction meetings with you, I was like, oh, I feel much more comfortable here.
Yeah.
Like I'm getting what people are saying. It's feeling more. So it's like, yeah, okay, that's... So that was kind of cool to me, kind of just helping me figure out what I was actually going through and what I needed to focus on for me. And it wasn't just, oh, I need to quit drinking because I'm the wife of an alcoholic. It's like, I need to quit drinking because I am an alcoholic and the wife of an alcoholic. And
Yeah.
it's, So, but after a little bit of time, I haven't really been as active in it as you.
Yeah, and that's sort of the thing too, that, like I was saying, your sobriety is your own. Like if you're good,
Right.
Without going to meetings, then you don't necessarily need to go to meetings. They also have the 7 rituals that kind of dovetail with the 7 tenets. And that's get back to like the behavioral,
the DBT.
DBT,
Yeah.
but there's no requirement that you do the 7 rituals. You can if you want to or need to, if it helps you, but you're not going to be kicked out or shamed if you don't. Again, it's another tool in sort of the toolbox. And my experience when we first got sober, I started going to AA meetings, and that was one of those things where I didn't really know what to expect. But it's like, where the meetings that I was going to were, they met in a church. They opened with the Serenity Prayer. They closed with everybody holding hands, doing the Lord's Prayer. And that was really surprising. Like, I didn't expect that at all. Like, because I had heard that, AA was supposed to be agnostic or whatever it is when it came to specific religions. And so when everybody, at the end started doing the Lord's Prayer, I was just kind of like,
welcome to the South.
Yeah, I was like, what is this?
And that's not fair, because I will say, when my mom would go, like, we lived on the East Coast in New York, and they did still do the prayers too. So
Yeah.
it's not a Southern.
Yeah,
I have a relative in California. It's the same there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know that it's all over the place, and I know that it's not like an official position of AA, but it seems to be pretty widespread. And I don't know that they would necessarily. I didn't ever try to fight it, but I don't know that people would necessarily take kindly to you asking that you don't do that.
Yeah.
But so at first, I remember telling Lil about it. Like, I'm going to try and overlook that. I'm going to try and not make that a thing, because I need to get sober and I need to do this. But for people that, I didn't necessarily have like religious trauma growing up, but for people who do, like, that's kind of a tall order to have them go, and they're trying to get sober, and now they're having to confront, this stuff that ostensibly is not supposed to be a part of it.
You're like battling 2 fronts at once.
Right.
Yeah. And a lot of people are struggling with situations like that or other things they're working through. The drinking was the coping mechanism,
Right.
and now you're trying to stop the drinking, but you're dealing with exactly what
Yeah.
caused you.
Yeah.
I could see it being a real problem. And so when we started going to Sober Faction meetings, that was like a breath of fresh air. Like, it was really nice not to have, like, they did what they said, like, it was not going to have any sort of supernatural component, and it didn't have any sort of supernatural component. There wasn't like a gotcha at the end, and so yeah, that really sort of drew us in. That he said it's sort of face value.
And just to clarify again, I know you can't officially speak for Sober Faction, but there's been a little bit of back and forth in news about like the supposed split, but TST still, Sober Faction is still part of TST. It was just some people left Sober Faction.
Right, that's correct. Yeah, there was an article recently, and I think the way that the reporter worded it was that Sober Faction had splintered off from TST, and they just left it at that. Which I definitely raised my eyebrows when I read that, and then didn't see any clarification later on. So Sober Faction did not splinter off from TST. That makes it sound like the whole thing just left, and that's not what happened. There was a disagreement among some of Sober Faction's leadership, and some of the leadership did leave Sober Faction and leave TST and started their own group. But other members of the leadership stayed with Sober Faction, and they started rebuilding and getting meetings back up and running and everything. And now it's going strong again, like it was before all of that happened.
Yeah.
So
it's amazing how people take that and they sort of spin it in their own way, because that happens everywhere, whether it's a church, a business. The CEO of a company leaves. They don't say Coca-Cola split, it's like, no, the CEO of the company left and they replaced it with a new CEO.
Right.
Coca-Cola's still there,
The nice thing was, honestly, they left. They were doing their own thing. People are still getting the help they need. There's still a group there. Good for them. And then TST is still doing what they were doing, and we're working to just make sure people are getting what they need, which is a group to help maintain their sobriety.
And
so I was happy about
There's not really competition between
we could use more.
Yeah. The more non-religious groups, the better.
Yeah, it's like now there's another group that people can go to get the help that they need that doesn't embrace supernaturalism and all of that stuff either. And so,
the more the merrier.
Yeah.
But yeah, the article, the Atlantic article, which went into so many interesting things. As people are newer to Satanism, how have you personally felt about these kind of infighting conversations that tend to come up so often?
I mean, it's not unexpected.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people with a lot of diverse viewpoints, and TST seems to kind of embrace pluralism, which is again like one of the draws for me. But when you do that, you're going to have disagreements, and part of, I think, the sort of maturing process is learning how to deal with those disagreements and not have maybe as much drama as there's been in some of them. Like, I'm kind of looking forward to the organization itself learning better how to deal with those things, so that, again, sort of knowing ahead of time that, like, these things are going to come up.
Yeah.
Like, there's no avoiding it, and especially when you've got, so many people who, again, like, I mean, we're basically like, what is it, like a group of non-joiners,
right?
It's like you got a lot of loners and stuff, and that in itself is pluralistic. That you have just all these people that are very focused on individualism and seeing things their own way, and now they have to work together, and that requires compromise. And I don't know. That's it's a very young organization, only 10 years, and I think that it's definitely been impressive that it's weathered what it has weathered.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am looking forward to sort of
the maturing,
getting kind of over the growing pains,
Yeah, I don't know that they ever fully go away. I know when I came into COS back when, they had tried something similar to the congregation program. Tommy and myself actually joined that program and tried, but it did not live very long at all. They couldn't deal with that. So I was very proud of the fact that despite the very diverse nature of TST, every congregation I've interacted with is done differently. The leadership is formed differently. The way that they go about their business is very different. And yet there's a very common undercurrent to it where the people are there to accomplish goals. And those goals are to create a religious environment that's based on the tenets, that provides a community, that gives people support and a sounding board for life. And that's, no matter where you go, that tends to be what's happening. And granted, some of the congregations have issues. We all have issues.
Yeah.
But we learn to work through it. And I think that's what's been nice. So there is a sign of maturity that I think is hopeful. And then, like, you guys decided to come in on leadership council and be part of that, even though, like, you're still getting your feet under you in some ways, but you've been here for a while now. And so it was natural for you to move into that. Was the impetus of that to kind of help shape things, or what was your interest in being more involved at that level?
I mean, honestly, I think that a lot of it was, again, just wanting to have sort of responsibilities that we needed to be there for, just personally. And then also, just the idea that we could help sort of shape the congregation and sort of respond to what the congregants are looking for. That's what's really interesting to me is to kind of make sure that we're doing things that they're interested in, and that that are benefiting, the congregants. So yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
So during one of our other discussions, you brought up, and I found this really interesting, that sober faction, although maybe it's not in the charter, again, we're not officially speaking for sober faction, but there's people in sober faction that aren't just drug or alcohol addicts. There's behavioral addicts, and they kind of treat everything the same. So like AA is specifically focused on alcohol, and you get some drug addicts in there, but then for that you've got NA, but somebody with, say, sex addiction or something like that wouldn't probably be welcomed there. Whereas in sober faction, it seems, at least the impression that I've got, is that if it's an addiction, then sober faction's there to help you through that addiction.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. There is a very wide diversity as far as what addictions people are dealing with. There's gambling, there's sex, there's porn, there's obviously alcohol and drugs. But yeah, I think that there's sort of an underlying common thread where an addiction is an addiction, and it's usually born of something deeper. And so that's kind of the unifying thing. And I'm not a therapist or anything like that, but this is just, again, just kind of what I'm gleaning from listening to people. And so, yeah, they're all involved, they're all involved in the meetings. They're all, Sober Faction has an allyship program that, where, if you're reaching out on, say, the Facebook group, you might get, you put out a post and then you have to kind of wait for people to respond, right? And you don't necessarily know who's going to respond. It's kind of a group thing, and you have to put all that out there sort of publicly. I think you can post as an anonymous user, but it's not as personal. Whereas with the allyship program, you're sort of matched with somebody who is also undergoing, sobriety or dealing with an addiction, and they can kind of help you one-on-one. And there's not a student teacher sort of dichotomy of like the sponsorship stuff in AA.
I was going to just say, sponsorship with AA, but that's more of a, like you said, a student teacher.
Yeah, and there's sort of a power dynamic there. And with this one, with the allyship thing, it's like everybody's on equal footing and you're just helping each other. And again, I think it goes back to more of this idea that like Sober Faction is sort of there to help facilitate people helping themselves. You ultimately have to show up to the meetings. You have to post, you have to reach out for an ally, all that thing, all of that stuff. But that's what Sober Faction's there to at least help you with, so you're not having to just white knuckle everything on your own.
Right. Well, and I kind of like that, because when you don't have that power dynamic shift, I think maybe it helps avoid some of the toxic things that you tend to see with that displaced, I've been doing this forever and I'm this mentor and I'm better than you, essentially, and it's not geared that way.
Right. I've spilled more wine on my shirt than you drink in your life. I mean, I've heard some horrible things, like when I was a teenager and going to AA and NA, and I was like, you really think that helps people?
Right.
I mean, it was, and so the other thing, I mean, and I'm going to ask you more your personal opinion on this. Things like harm reduction, because I remember when I went to AA, and I think things might be a little bit different now, but it was like, if you were an alcoholic or you were a drug addict, you were forever and ever and ever and ever and ever an alcoholic and drug addict, and you could never touch anything else again. So if you were an alcoholic and you smoked marijuana, maybe to help you get past something, but marijuana never ruined your life. It never took over that, but they'd still consider that a relapse. Whereas I know in discussions with people, some people consider that more harm reduction, and it's not necessarily looked at as a relapse or something like that. And it's okay to do, so long as marijuana, again, doesn't take over your life, whatever it is that you're, doing.
Yeah, and that's been my understanding from talking with people as well, that I think that there's definitely a diversity of views regarding that particular thing, but I know that there are people who practice harm reduction and who advocate for it as sort of another tool to be used, where, like, for some people, they have to go completely nothing, they can't use anything.
Yeah.
It's like full on sobriety. And for other people, it's like I think some of the stuff is viewed sort of like with drugs that people don't necessarily think of as drugs, like coffee and stuff. Like you're still
Smoking,
drinking coffee and
cigarettes,
still
yeah.
smoking, nicotine and things like that. So things like marijuana are sort of used in that kind of capacity, that like this is something that helps people to not use the drug that's been ruining their lives.
Right.
It's like, so that's sort of the dynamic or whatever with harm reduction.
Yeah, I always found that really ironic and somewhat hypocritical when I would go to AA, and it's like they would teach that whole you can never touch anything else again, but it's a room full of people smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day, drinking 12 cups of coffee and all
Right.
that. So it's like, well, those are all addictive substances too.
Right. Yeah. And that's right there is like a form of harm reduction, right?
Yeah.
Like you're smoking and drinking coffee so that you're not, it helps you to not drink alcohol.
Or you
Yeah.
become like an exercise addict or you sex addict. There's lots of ways people cope with one addiction gets changed out for another. So
Right.
Something else that gives you that dopamine.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think we all kind of use harm reduction to different degrees, understanding that just means reducing whatever was causing the massive amounts of harm or finding a more ethical way to kind of work through that. And, there are positive ways like joining communities and creating connections and friendships and moving on in ways that are seen healthy. And then there's finding ways to no longer drink, every day, and maybe you're smoking marijuana on occasion. As long as you're not unable to live your life, I think, and you're doing things positive for yourself, for your family, and you're healthy, that's up to you,
Yeah.
And I think you need to be aware also of, and Lilibat, you brought this up in a discussion we had where like you considered yourself a high functioning alcoholic.
Yes.
So you can still be an alcoholic and not, or a drug addict or something, and not have it destroying your life, but you're still addicted and doing things in a way that you shouldn't be doing them, but you're just high functioning at that point. You
Yeah.
haven't quite made it to the next level.
And it's really easy with alcohol because so many people drink.
Yeah.
And it's a really common thing at parties
Social
or
activity,
get-togethers,
yeah.
social. So it's very easy to say, "Oh, I don't think I drink more than Sally, and she's fine," So it's pretty easy to talk yourself out of
Yes.
that, accepting that you are an alcoholic. But I definitely drink more than most, and I learned through. I had a counselor for a bit when we first quit drinking, and I went to her saying, "Oh, I'm the wife of an alcoholic." And after I would tell her about my behaviors with alcohol, she was like, "I think you might be an alcoholic too." And just kind of, it still is weird for me to say it, but I do realize it.
I don't think it ever stops being weird, like I grew up
Yeah.
as a child of alcoholics, like, oh, I'll never be like those people,
Yeah.
and that's awful. And then you slowly start drinking and then adding more drinks, then realizing you need drinks to cope with, the drinks that you had. So,
Yeah. Yes.
and then it just kind of spirals out of there, because I know for a long time I would do that. Like I said, anxiety, social interaction was super stressful. So of course I'm going to coast through it by having a couple drinks, and then before you know it, you're doing that all the time. And then, hey, you're an alcoholic, but you don't necessarily want to say it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
when you're in your own bubble, it's hard to see yourself from the outside. So, looking back now, I'm like, yeah, that I drank a lot, because I drank so much to the point that we kind of couldn't go anywhere anymore.
Yeah.
He drank more than me, but I also drank to the point where it's like, well, I know I'm going to get real drunk real fast. That's going to be my goal. So I can't really even be around anybody because I don't want people to see me like that. So we would have to avoid family functions or get-togethers with friends if it was like too late in the day, because we'll be like, well, we'll be too drunk by then. So we can't go to that. So we were literally just slowly isolating ourselves more and more so that we could accommodate how much we needed to drink.
Yeah.
And so it's funny now to say that and be like, what? I'm not an alcoholic. But yeah, when you're in it, you just kind of can't quite see it for what it is. And then, like I said, I could look around and see other people that I thought were that's an alcoholic, not me.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Right. It's hard because so much of our society is geared. I mean, there's work functions about drinking and there's social functions for drinking.
Yeah.
And you go to a wedding and everybody's drinking. And so, and then you're not supposed to drink and drive, but you got to get to the bar and then you got to leave the bar.
Right
so.
home from the bar.
It's like a whole lot of weird stuff where drinking, we all know, I mean, unquestionably is bad for our bodies and for our minds, and yet it's so ingrained in everything we do.
Yeah.
I mean, I was definitely a very high functioning because I always, even when I was a teenager and going through I'm going to do every single drug in the book in as much quantity as I can. I still held a job. I still always showed up for work and all of that sort of stuff. But if there was 4 bottles of wine in the house, I'm drinking all 4 bottles of those wine that night if I start drinking. I could go days without drinking, but if I pop one of those open, they're all getting done.
Yeah.
It's like that was just the type of personality that I had. It was like, well, we're going to do this and we're going to,
all the way.
put everything into it.
Yeah. And that's, looking back for me, it's like, I think I was getting to the point where I was becoming not high functioning.
Yeah.
I was getting to the point where, like, I think my job would have been in trouble. It was hard to get through the day without drinking, and I never drank at work, but I probably would have started pretty soon after, had I not stopped. Like, that's just how it goes. It's a progressive thing, and it was getting bad. And then when you, like I said, when you look back on it, you're just like, man, I can't believe, like, it's such, like, obvious red flags, but when you're in it, you're like,
it's
fine.
Not
I'm so bad,
Yeah. I used to tell Lilin, I was like, there was times where it was like, I never knew the personality that would come out when she'd get drunk. It was like, flip a coin, Are you going to be the really fun drunk, or are you going to be the, not so fun drunk? And you just never really knew. And that was, one of those things that, as we talked about things, and I got sober I had a medical reason. So, I kind of didn't have a choice. I had a choice. I just didn't want to die.
Good choice.
So that made it easier to quit alcohol anyways.
Right.
Because alcohol was the one that I continued to do, because when she got pregnant with our first child, I quit all hard drugs. It was like, okay, cool, I'm quitting the hard drugs because it was my choice what to do to my body and all of that sort of stuff, but it wasn't my choice for a child to have dad drooling on himself on the floor or something like that and not able to make them breakfast or anything, But alcohol, well, that's okay. Like, it's everywhere. That's, and so I just kind of switched and kept escalating and escalating and escalating. And then, I got a medical condition, and then it made it easy to stop that.
Yeah, but I mean, having kids was good for that because we both were away from all of that stuff, and we met because I was hanging out at a club on occasion and couldn't always afford to go, so I'd wait for everybody to get out of the club, and then we'd go and drink or whatever after, and then you happened to show up at this IHOP where I like to hang out. We'd always meet there.
About 3 a.m.
And we partied really hard. We met, we hung out, and it was just pretty much it. Like 3 months later, we were married. But it was always like drinking party, have fun, drinking party, have fun. He'd go to work, and I'd do my thing, and then that was kind of the way it went. Drinking party, have fun. And then,
drink party, have fun.
I got pregnant. It was like, well, if you drink, I'm going to really be pissed at you because I can't drink. So then you're like, fine, I won't do it around you. And then you're like, okay, I won't do it at all. And then, it just seemed stupid. And all the people we would drink and party, have fun with were like, oh, you have kids, you're not fun, and now you're married and we don't like you.
Yeah.
And so we kind of had to start looking at different kind of friend groups and stuff. So it was... I
think that's the harder thing, too, is depending on your age. Like... I would have never been able to quit drinking. I shouldn't say that. It would have been a lot harder for me to quit drinking. You wouldn't have had a reason. In my 20s or 30s, because it's like, well, what else are you going to do?
Right.
It's Friday night. where the hell else are you going to go but the bar? Why aren't you going to the bar? What's wrong? Are you sick? Do you not feel well?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then y'all brought up, and by this time I had already stopped drinking, so I didn't really actually experience it, but during the lockdown where they deliver alcohol to you now, and it's like, I was like, holy shit, that would have gotten me in so much trouble.
Yeah, I remember buying like 3 handles of vodka or something because there was like a threshold you had to meet, you know?
Yeah.
If you're going to order, go big.
Order, and it was just like, oh man, this is...
And they wouldn't last very long.
They wouldn't last very long. No, they wouldn't.
You'd have thought they would have, but...
No. No. I went through that phase where I would have like the big bottle of vodka in the freezer, and I'm the only one in my house that would drink the vodka, and I'd have my little bottle of Zing Zang, you know, for my little tiny splash of flavor, and go through it like in a couple of days. That would be the whole thing. Yeah. And, you know, again, you're trying to cope with your own issues that you're not necessarily dealing with, and that's, as a Satanist for a long time, you know, you have to be accountable. You don't want to be accountable? Well, then avoid it. And then realize it's just a lot more crap you stepped in. Now you have to wash the crap off and still be accountable. So it was, that process kind of over and over again for a while.
Yeah. So how long now are y'all sober?
I think we recently had an anniversary.
Didn't you say you had an anniversary?
Yeah, we got sober after Labor Day of 2021. And so that's about 2 years. We're at, I think, like 25 months, something
That's
now.
awesome.
So,
that's cool.
Yeah. It's been great.
So, go ahead.
I was going to say, is this one of the best experiences you've had on that process personally, or?
I had never even tried to quit drinking before, really. I mean, I had to quit drinking twice when I was pregnant. And that was just, I guess it was easy for me. I just didn't drink. But my husband still drank. All of my friends still drank, and it did suck. It felt weird to be just the sober pregnant lady going like, ooh, okay, well, this isn't fun. But by the time we quit this time, like, I was really ready. I had actually wanted to quit and sort of tried a few times and felt like I couldn't. And that's when I was starting to get a little worried, like, that's weird. That's interesting. I can't quit. What's up with that?
Interesting turn of events.
And so when we finally did, I was really relieved. And it's been great for us personally. For me, it's like, I think I didn't realize, for me, how much I was toning down all of my experiences. I thought drinking made things more fun. Mm-hmm. I didn't drink to cope. At least wasn't why I thought I was drinking. I thought I was drinking because it made everything more fun. And but it doesn't. I don't remember things. I am half experiencing things because I'm groggy and trashed. And so it's been really interesting over the past 2 years to realize, wow, it's actually really fun to fully experience a concert, to really hear it and take it in, or a movie, or to go to an event and you can remember it the next day. I mean, I'm just really enjoying that aspect. And all my anxiety, I used to have a lot of troubles with anxiety, and that seems to be gone. So that was something that I guess alcohol was causing. I didn't realize. And I know it's different for everyone. This is just my experience to feel. It feels much better to me being sober. So I have zero desire to drink anymore at this point. So I'm really enjoying this.
Nice. That's cool. I was much the same way as you. I drank. I didn't think I was drinking to cope with anything. I drank because I thought it enhanced everything. Yeah. But I look back now and I'm like, I know I went to like fucking 20 or 30 concerts between the age of 15 and 30 something. I might remember 2 of them. Yeah. And it's like, okay, I'm sure it was fun, but I have no memories of them. Whereas now, I've gone to a few concerts, and I remember every single concert. It's a totally different experience. I can actually immerse myself into what I'm doing and get pleasure from that because I'm actually able to immerse myself. I'm not like, whoa, yeah. And then the next day waking up, what the fuck did we do last night?
Or the eternal porcelain promise where you're like, I'm never going to do this again if I could just get through this horrible hangover.
Yeah. So, my experience was much like you've described.
Every night doesn't have to be like the movie The Hangover, where you wake up and look at the pictures and go, what the, it's like,
Exactly.
hey, I was there. I remember it all.
Yeah.
Oh, and in today's very digital world, that's like a horrible nightmare.
Yeah. That would have been really bad when I was a teenager. So what advice would you give? I know we're kind of coming up on an hour, so I don't want to run too much longer, but what advice would you give people that are either like exploring sobriety, and maybe, like you said, apprehensive about sober faction being attached to TST? That's a satanic organization versus AA, and but then I have to go to a higher power and all. I mean, so would you give any advice to people, or
I think I would say don't discount it. So keep an open mind, and read the tenets. If you're apprehensive about the TST connection, and kind of look into what TST does. And then, there's no harm in joining the Facebook group and checking it out.
Yeah.
There's no harm in going to a meeting and checking that out. And if worse comes to worse and you don't like it, you don't have to do it, So that's what I guess I would say. But just keep in mind that it's definitely an option. And like we said earlier, there are some other groups out there as well. So maybe that would spur someone to check out, some of the other groups that might be a better fit for them if they, have never heard of sober faction and want to check it out, and then branch out. Just try and find something that works for you.
So there's no weird rituals involved, no Satan involved.
Yeah, no. It's much like with TST, where Satan is a metaphor, and it's about self-empowerment, and it's about a literary Satan, drawn from you guys have talked about this before on the podcast. So even with the 7 rituals, they're non-theistic rituals, and they are really meant to sort of focus you and give you a purpose to kind of focus your mind and your intent on what it is that you want to get done. So
yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, and as far as just tips on sobriety in general, I'm no expert, but for me, I did have to find other ways to get that dopamine, because just removing it and then expecting to still be cool, it didn't really work. Yeah. So I did start exercise. I started lifting weights, and I started drinking a little bit more caffeine. I would have a caffeine buzz that I would enjoy instead of an alcohol buzz. Did eat a lot of sugar at first. I had to get myself weaned off of that after a while. It's too much sugar. Doesn't do well for me either. But finding healthy ways to get dopamine was what really helped me deal with that. Because, you train your brain to get all that dopamine from alcohol. So I needed some other ways. So one random thing that maybe helps somebody, don't know.
Nice. So get out there and find things that bring you happy, healthy enjoyment, and maybe even a community that supports what you're trying to accomplish.
Yes.
And just remember, if you do relapse, it's part of the process. Don't let anybody shame you into, I love the gym analogy.
Yeah, I thought that was a good one I heard.
That's a perfect analogy. You don't go back and say, I'm starting all over. I never went to the gym. This is my first day at the gym. It's like, no, I went for 6 months and I missed a day. Okay.
Yeah. You could say I'm on day 106 of my sobriety journey, where maybe on day 25 there was a blip. Right. But you're still on day 106 of the journey, if that's how you would look at it.
And again, we're all fallible, so we accept our mistakes, we recognize our mistakes, and then we do what we need to move forward from that. And every mistake is really a learning opportunity if you take advantage of it. So
awesome. Well, with that, I think we can wrap. And thank you all for
Nigel and Lilibat. Appreciate hanging out with you guys.
Awesome.
Yeah,
likewise.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
All right. Well, hail Satan.
Hail Satan.